Hello and welcome to Manibil. This is my first sort of follow-up to my recent video on called Chicken or Egg, Metaphilosophy, Philosophy and Ontology. And it's particularly because Johnny Isometric made a very long comment with a lot of questions in it, and I would like to take that as a starting point for elaborating on my video. Not that I don't think it can sort of stand alone, but it's nice to you cannot possibly cover all ends of all little details here and there, right? That in a presentation that is is not written like a book or just on the fly as I do here, right? So you get my point. Okay, so John Isometric wrote, is it possible that memory belongs in category A instead of C? To me, it isn't. Because memory is, first of all, there is a correlation between each of the qualia and a particular kind of quality. That sounds circular, right? They are sort of they're distinct in a way, you could say. A sound is nothing like a color, right? And a taste is nothing like a smell, right? Sometimes when you describe, some qualia, you use some other types of qualia, like an abstraction of some kind. When you say the taste of the wine is sort of full-bodied and round, and it's not round, right? But it's a way of expressing. It's a description of the qualia for a type of qualia that doesn't have really a good language to describe it, right? Or not a sufficient language, maybe, right? While like colors are very sort of, it's more rounded. But you say warm colors and cold colors and attach all sorts of meanings. The white is innocence and black is darkness and evil, whatever, right? Red is, passion, and it is like, what? Right? So there might be some, like the bull that the red scarf in front of the bull makes the bull angry because it's supposed to, from its evolution, when it sees that color in nature, there's something that alerts it, so to say, right? So it's sort of a phobia or something like that, right? So it's like all these things don't explain anything, but at the end of the day, all these have a particular distinct qualia to it. Memories are made up of situations. They are, the best way I can describe it, are snapshots of prior situations, right? And those situations are made up of something that has colors and cognitions and tastes and whatever, right? You remember the taste of this and that and the other, right? If you think of when you hear a melody or a particular. The other day there was some smell of something. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, and I can't describe the smell, but there was something about the smell that reminded me of something, and I couldn't even think of what the hell it was, but it brought me back to my childhood. And I don't remember what it was or where it was or what part, when I was 5 years old or 8 years old or 2 years old. I don't know. This reminds me of something way back in time, right? So it's because of the memories, in my opinion, are these kinds of snapshots of qualia and cognitions, which is a situation, right? Or an event or whatever. A situation is maybe I should define this, right? Is a situation is a snapshot. It's like a photograph, right? An event is a series of snapshots wherein certain changes of cognitions take place. An event is when that meteor fell from the sky, right? There was a situation, there was a certain cognition which was called meteor that sort of came down from the sky or whatever, right? A situation is a snapshot. The event is the goings on of particular of a or some particular aspects of that situation, right? Okay. You can't have that without a cognition of any kind, right? Or an experience and a cognition. So these events or situations in the memory are prior category A and B in a snapshot form. Right? I don't understand how it works. It's just something I can recall and so on. I have no access to what is going on in that kind of memory library, right? I can just access it. So there's no way to me to argue. In fact, it's contradictory to what I'm actually referring to when I'm referring to a memory. A memory, you could say, is a combination of various qualia, but that cannot in itself then be a qualia. If it's made up of qualia I've already described in my ontology, and it's a set of these qualias, right? It cannot be fundamental then in my ontology. So I think it's the best way to describe what I mean, right? But I'd like to state that I really am a very big proponent of free market philosophy, right? If you want to go that route, when you ask this way, it implies that you want somebody. I'm not saying that you're doing it, but it tells me you might be searching for somebody to tell you how things work. You have to do that yourself. Don't take my shit for granted, right? Don't take my description. I might be completely fucked, right? I hope not. I haven't found any flaws yet, and when I found a flaw, I try to get rid of it, or rearrange my ontology so that it doesn't excuse me, doesn't have this flaw or this contradiction or whatever it might be, right? That seems to be a rare approach these days, in my opinion, where what I usually hear is when people have something thrown at their face, right? It's, well, I can explain it this, that, and the other, and then they're going to throw all sorts of abstractions at you and say, I explained it. It's rather, it's the idea of defending your position, right? As I hear a lot from a guy like Bernardo Kastrup, he's defending. It's like it's a trench warfare for him, right? No, it's not. If you have your ontology, that's it. You have your ontology. Fine. Knock yourself out with your ontology. But when you're trying to convince others that you have the correct ontology, you are potentially fighting against somebody else who has an ontology. And if I'm in a trench warfare, let's say, about ontologies, for instance, right? What would I want to do? Would I just want to sit in my trench and say, I'm right? Or would I say, okay, hang on, let's not fight about this. Let me hear your version of it. And if I find flaws in it, I might be like something like, interesting thinking. I think there are flaws there and there and there and there. Go back to your drawing board and try again, right? And I'll go back to my trench, right? I might, before I go back to my trench, I might want to tell that person to tell me whether or not there are flaws in mine, though because he has a flaw, or he or she has a flawed ontology, I might be less inclined to believe it. But I wouldn't mind having the criticism, right? And it's it is at that point you have to realize that psychology is a big player in fundamental philosophy and in all philosophy, because if it ends up pointing back that you weren't right about that which you were completely convinced about, what kind of message are you sending to your surroundings that you might be flawed in your thinking? So when you start talking, okay, I changed my thinking, now I have a new thinking. There was something wrong with the old one, now I have a new one, this is correct. Are people going to say, well, why would I trust you this time then, right? So what people are always flocking towards are those who are never saying anything that is, they are sophists about everything, in the sense that they are going to cover up and throw all sorts of abstractions as bullshit argument, a straw man, and all sorts of shit at you, or tell you that you're an idiot, you're not worthy of this discussion or whatever, right? To avoid arriving at the conclusion that they actually have the flaw, right? And people are flocking to these crazy people who can't see any flaws in their thinking, because the intuition might be that they must be right because there's no flaws in it, and they can refute all attacks, right? They can defend their position, right? It's sort of this sort of monkey shit throwing, sort of church flinging monkeys, right? It's on that level. You have to scrutinize your own stance, right? And that points in direction of, I have to say, well, you have to make your own. In order for you to criticize somebody else or participate in a discourse of this, you have to have your own thinking, right? You can't just sort of cherry pick your way to whatever you want, right? Okay, I'm rambling a bit on this. Excuse me. I have the hiccups. Okay, so further, Johnny says, I mean, aren't remembered, imagined qualia just less vivid qualia? In a sense, I experience them, even though they originate from my own mind. Yeah, but be careful that you're not mixing the categories here, right? You are trying to say the moon is the same as the snapshot of the moon. My photograph, if I take a snapshot with my iPhone I have actually a Canon DSLR, right? But whatever, of the moon or the sun or whatever, right? That's the same, or a tree or whatever is cognizable in a photograph. Then you're saying that photograph is of the same kind as the tree. That doesn't make sense for me, right? It seems to blur the lines between what is necessary to distinguish between. And maybe there's another point, but it's an interesting question. Maybe I haven't delved enough into it, but I think I'm sticking to my categories here, right? But when you have a memory of whatever, right? It cannot be the same quality as having. If you try to remember an elephant, whatever you saw 2 years ago in the zoo, it is not the same as if there was an elephant wandering around in your living room, right? Or a tiger you saw in the zoo is not the same as if there was a tiger over there in the corner, right? They are different. And there is the time aspect also, because there's no time involved in a snapshot. If I experience tiger, I'm experiencing tiger. It's a now, right? But a memory is a then, back then, right? Or in the past, so to say. And because it's in the past, it is influenced by time, in the sense that there is a distance, mental memory distance called time, between now and that memory. There is no time between my memory, between my experience and my experience. It is in the now, right? So you could lump everything up in one big pile, I guess, right? And say there are these 200 categories or whatever. And qualia is just one of them, and memory is another of them. Fine. It's just not good enough for where I want to go with my ontology, right? So, I'm curious whether your X and ins suggest assuming from the start the existence of an outside and an inside. That's a good point, actually. That's a good point. And it's also yes, it's one of the criticism I have of Bernardo Castro, that it might be actually a very bad idea to use those terms, at least in the beginning of my ontology, because I'm basically labeling something as if there's something beyond what I'm describing, right? It's a very good point, and it's actually something I think I have sort of wondered about a bit, right? And just like I did in my using knowledge as the middle category before we get to experience, knowledge, and experience, I have to change these categories. I agree with you that this is a bad choice of term to in order to avoid not taking something for granted that is not a part of your ontology, right? Very good point. And I like that somebody who reads my shit gives it to me this way. It's a very good kind of criticism, this, right? That's why I'm particularly fond of and creates this video, because this is exactly the kind of criticism I would love to have, right? Rather than saying, you're stupid because you're not like Bernardo Castro, I'm going back to my priest, right? Okay, well, go have fun, right? I actually agree with you. I have to come up with some better terms, if I at all need terms. Now, I think when you're discussing, clarifying some philosophy, it is near impossible not to come up with some kind of terms for what you're trying to describe, and sort of lumping categories together in, for instance, qualia, rather than saying color and sound and taste and touch and smell and so on, right? So in order to make it uncumbered text of description, these kinds of categorical terms are necessary, but they have to be introduced in the right way. Maybe that's the point, right? I can't talk about them as a description of something if that description comes with additional understandings, like experience, which points to something that is outside, right? Extraterrestrial, right? So it's a very good point. It's you're very sharp on this, right? Because this bites my own ass in my sort of criticism of Bernardo Castro. Okay, and then it says at 3:33:26, you say the idea of time is also some kind of abstraction. Yes, because it's not time, it's an idea of time, right? I'm inclined to agree, though I'm not entirely certain. Be careful with certainty, right? I would use the term sure, but certainty is a dangerous idea, right? Time is a feeling, after all, a quail, isn't it? No, it's not a feeling, right? Feel is when you touch, you have a feel of something, right? Or are you meaning like I have like I'm hungry, or I am sad, or I'm happy, or I am frustrated, whatever, right? Then time is one of these kinds of feelings. I don't think so. So that's why you're not entirely certain, because you think that time is something you have a feeling about. No, it's like it's a particular, I see it as time as a particular aspect of a particular area within my awareness, or created by my awareness. There might be something going on in my awareness that creates the idea of time in me, the abstraction time, right? That's why you call it a feeling, maybe, because it seems to be there without, you can't grasp it, right? I think you can't access time, but you can abstract some notion of time, but that abstraction is not time. Just like taking a photograph of a tree is not a tree, right? So you can have a notion of tree without actually experiencing tree. In the same fashion, you can have a notion of time without accessing time, right? The notion that something you experienced yesterday is not influenced or placed in memory at the same distance as something you experienced in your childhood, right? But they're still just sort of memories, right? So time is an aspect of how you work, but you can't access time directly. You can only sort of say, I'm thinking of this memory. Okay, do I have a notion of a distance to that memory? Yes, I have a distance to it. I'm influenced by the time that is in my memory, but I'm not experiencing that time. I'm more like experiencing how far away that memory is in some kind of ideal manner or idea manner, right? I think it's I'm very careful about this time aspect because it's so vague. I want it to say as little as possible about it in order not to say too much, right? And it's this, there's an urge in people I see that they want to explain everything fully. And because they need that or want that, they're going to explain more than they can possibly explain. Because they feel they need it and they have to because, right? I'm so brilliant, right? Be careful not to explain more than you can explain or explain it in ways you cannot actually, it's just made up as a placeholder for that which you cannot actually really explain or describe, right? It might, he writes further here, and it might extend to an even more basic level. In fact, cognitions arise from a temporal statistical analysis of perceptions, recognitions of repeating patterns of qualia and patterns of patterns. Yeah, I think so. That's what I call the cognitive apparatus. There's something going on in that, but another aspect, which actually might be a part of that same awareness. I'm just put it, and it might be more complicated what is actually going on, rather than my simplified ontology. But you have to simplify it in order to have something to work with, in my opinion. You have to make some shortcuts, make some generalizations and so on. Otherwise, it gets so cumbersome that you can't use it in philosophy. That's the difference between a new neuroscience. First of all, neuroscience is taking a dump on the idea of the hard problem, right? It's doing neuroscience in order to get an explanation of what is going on in your, quote, mind is misguided, in my opinion. But it's the scientific approach of all little details have to be in place. We can't make generalizations of any kind here, right? It's because, but no, you have to do that. I think it's just about making the right generalizations, right? Cognitions arrive from temporal statistical analysis. Temporal statistical, I'm not. Maybe statistical. I don't. I'm sort of. I'm fine with the use of terms. I'm not sure that they're basically correct in their use, but you might mean just about the same as I'm thinking, right? So I'm not going to take your use of your terms part. Though temporal analysis, I don't know, how would you use time to analyze? I don't know. I don't see how that works. Okay. If I decide that cognition equals knowledge, I can't know for sure if it's knowledge about an external world. No, exactly. Well, why would you? You haven't established. I haven't established knowledge about any external world. In fact, I would reject it very furiously. Knowledge is when I point to the cognitions They are a part of my experience. They are a particular category of qualia, right? They are a particular cognition among qualia. I'm not sure how to put it, but it's something that I have access to at least, right? Knowledge about an external world is knowledge about something you don't have access to, so it can't be knowledge. That's the whole point. I don't care about the external world. If I decided that there must be something beyond, if I decide to say I'm working from the idea that there's something beyond my experiences, okay, but that doesn't mean all of a sudden I can go and tell you what it is, because I didn't even know if there was something beyond my experiences. So by the nature of my imagination, or the imaginary nature of my thinking, I can't go and tell you what it is, because it was pure imagination, right? I imagined that there might be something, but just because I imagine something doesn't mean that I can go and tell you what it is. If I'm sat all my life in this living room looking at my wall, and I decide I'm going to work from the idea that there's something beyond these walls, that doesn't mean all of a sudden I can tell you what is out there, right? So I'm locked within this experience of mine, right? This living room of mine. And I'm going to say, that loudspeaker and that lamp and that painting are knowledge. That doesn't mean all of a sudden I can tell you about knowledge outside my living room if I've never been there, right? And I can't experience it. And I can't go there and experience it. I'm always bringing this living room along. I'm sitting in the center of the living room all my life. So that's the point. I just think that it nags people infinitely that there is something they can't get to. They so desperately want to tell themselves and you about what is beyond those walls. And they come up with some harebrained abstraction and say, aha, ripples, right? I'm not buying it. No, for sure, it's knowledge of... No. It doesn't tell... My knowledge, my definition of knowledge, exactly avoids any kind of description of an external world. I am describing an internal world. My knowledge. Be careful. Be careful. You don't make... It's just around the corner. When you sort of try to jump out of your experience and say, now I'm describing an external world. No, in my opinion, you can't do that, right? You have to establish it first, and you have to establish it by argument. You can't establish it from imagination. Then Santa Claus and unicorns are as valid as anything, right? It doesn't work. But I can assert with confidence that it's knowledge about the statistical Yeah, you can say that. I would maybe choose some other words or put the words together in another way. But it's basically, I think, what I'm trying to say, that I have confidence in my own knowledge. So all knowledge in this sense is basically subjective. And all materialists and physicalists are going to fucking jump up and scream at you for saying that knowledge is subjective, right? Knowledge is always objective, right? Why? What is it about it, right? If it's anything, it's subjective because it's my experience, right? I am describing my subjective experience. And this particular category I've labeled as knowledge. And you have to label your own categories or some part of your phenomena as knowledge. What else could it possibly be, right? So it is subjective from its starting point. I can assert with confidence that it's knowledge about the statistical regularity. Yeah, but in other ways saying it's purely subjective, right? So is time a required entity to make sense of qualia cognition dynamics? No, absolutely not. No. It's the other way around. You have to understand qualia cognitions in order to make sense of time, because these are stored in memory, and each scene is put in order of something called time. try to think of it this way. If you had only two memories or one memory in your mind, right? That, and that memory was 80 years ago, right? Then would that be a different kind of memory if you only had one memory and it was 80 minutes ago? Would the 80 minutes ago memory be smaller than the 80 years ago memory? I don't think so, right? Why would it? I mean, it might in some way, depending on how it works, but it would be make much more, rational sense to say it's just an, it's just a, it's a representation of something. Time is a representation of something I absolutely no access to. I only access to time as a distance between these memories, so to say, right? And the now. And I don't even have direct access to that. That I only have some kind of idea of, right? So what time ultimately is, even if you say it's some kind of representation of an external world, then it's a representation I don't have direct access to. So it's very, very fluffy, this time thing, right? It is not a required entity, quote, to make sense of qualia. No, it isn't. You could make sense of, well, not to make sense of qualia cognition dynamics. You don't. I don't think so. But, because of whatever is going on, you could say that, I hesitate to say it, but could say that the ability to cognize is a reflection of whatever it is that is going on that is presented to you in your memory as time. If whatever is going on didn't expect there to be other tigers and other elephants cognitions, why would it be able to cognize? Because it's like saying, I have trained myself to cognize this, so I expect to be able to cognize elephant in the future, so to say, right? I hesitate to go into this because it is paved with circular reasoning, right? So time is a part of this, and therefore it ends up being I'm experiencing time, right? Careful. So keep it as simple as you can, right? Don't say more than you can stand for, right? And be satisfied with that. Also, I think a good ontology should be matrix proof. So now we're going to the movies. The hot lady in red is certainly cognition for Neo, but in reality, she is just code. So can we say that Neo has knowledge too? Well, you can't get to that reality you're speaking of, right? It's this imagination that you have an understanding of what is going on before everything becomes what you experience. That's a fantasy, right? And in the idea of the matrix, it is of a malevolent, what's it called? Not malevolent nature, right? It wants to control you and so on, right? But that matrix, it's a fantasy that you can somehow get to the other side of your experience and see what is going on there. You can't do that. If you experience, I mean, it is about this, the idea of what you experience and what might be beyond your experience, right? And calling it a matrix, I understand the how it works, this thing, right? There's also maybe a bit of Plato's cave and so on. but you can't get to what you then call reality. You are talking about that external world as the actual reality because you feel that it is responsible for the experience of the lady in red. But you can't get to the other side of this experience of it. You can't go beyond the wall, right? You can't get to whether or not it's matrix proof or not, right? If you experience a lady in red, you experience lady in red, right? Be careful that you don't think, and this is the fallacy, even for those who are materialist and physicalist, and I feel that I'm basically only the one who says you can't get to that external world, right? Just because you've seen a movie doesn't mean. By the way, it's a fine movie. I like The Matrix, right? But it's a fantasy. It is a fantasy, right? The hero who can, Bernardo Castro is Neo. He can go beyond the wall and tell you what is out there. It's a matrix, and it's there to, take advantage of you. You only have your experiences. Focus on those, rather than try to predict what is beyond your experiences, right? Because it takes you away from your actual everyday experience, which is the important one. Because it's the only one you have access to, right? And as I pointed out in another video that criticizes idealism, which is, okay, I have an experience. I'm coming up with the idea there might be something beyond or before my experience. I'm going to make up some thinking and philosophy about that external world. But then I come back to, the lady in red, for instance, right? Does my understanding of whatever I could come up with change my understanding of the lady in red? But it was because of the lady in red I started to think about what is before the lady in red. So whatever I can come up with cannot change that, because I would be changing that foundation I'm using to start thinking of what is behind that lady in red, right? So you would come up with a circular argument that actually destroys itself if you're changing your understanding of the lady in red based on a kind of thinking that started off with the lady in red. So if you change it, you're violating your foundations of your thinking. And if it doesn't change, it doesn't matter, right? So be careful about this matrix shit, right? So can we say that Neo has knowledge too? Yes, he has knowledge of lady in red. It's just lady, if that's his cognition, right? That is red is a particular description of the quality of that particular cognition, right? Okay, at 41:18 I say, you can't explain Eiffel Tower, right? You can't explain color. And then Johnny says, I'm not sure if I understand correctly. Okay. Assuming that by explain X, you mean break down X in relation to the constituents of the reduction base. No, but that's not an explanation, right? And be careful you don't put the cart before the horse here. Because if I have experience of Eiffel Tower, it is because I already have some qualia that made me able to cognize Eiffel Tower, right? So I can't explain Eiffel Tower the other way around. In the understanding I would call an explanation, right? I'm just saying that cognition, those qualia that are responsible for my cognition of Eiffel Tower are thus, right? It's this shape, it's this color, it's this taste, it's this feeling, and whatever, right? They are responsible. They have to be there in order for me to cognize Eiffel Tower. But they are not an explanation, right? It might be sort of a how to use the terms, but be careful. You are again, as we started out in your comments here, that you don't use terms that gives connotations to insights you don't have, but purely by semantics of the chosen words, right? So now I've explained Eiffel Tower. Well, that sounds good, but did you actually explain anything? I would say no. You're just pointing to whatever's going on in you, right? I don't think you can explain anything. All you can do is create an ontology where you can define shit in relation to that ontology. Then you can say, okay, then I'm explaining my shit through my ontology. Okay, fair enough. But I would hesitate to call that an explanation, right? You can't explain anything that goes on, because that would be saying this thing behind what I'm experiencing that I don't have access to is the explanation of why I'm experiencing red, for instance. By explanation, you are implicitly, in my opinion, appealing to metaphysics, right? I don't buy into metaphysics. I don't think you can create. I'm very, very concerned about people who try to create an ontology of that imagined realm beyond or before their experiences, or before their phenomena, maybe I should say, right? Certainly, I agree that we can't explain qualia, but we can describe cognitions in terms of the qualia, can't we? Exactly. We can describe cognition in terms of the qualia. The lady in red is a cognition with a particular color, right? She could be green, the lady in green, or the lady in brown, or the lady in whatever, right? It's still a lady, but the qualia is particular aspect, quality of that particular cognition. If you have an agreement with that lady, you meet her on the corner, right? I will wear a red dress. Then you would look for a cognition that has that particular quality. You wouldn't look for somebody in a blue dress, right? But it would still be a lady, maybe. So yes, the quality is also, when you have the cognition, you can clarify or classify the same cognitions in different kinds of qualities based on their qualia, right? Like it's the blue elephant and the red elephant, all the blue elephants there, all the red elephants over there, or all the ladies with blue dresses over here, and all the ladies with red dresses over there, right? So it's the same kind of concept or cognition, but they had different qualia, right? So you can further differentiate. Like if you have a green banana, it's not as good as a yellow banana, but a brown banana is also not very good, right? So it's sort of not very good, and not very good, right? It's still a banana, but based on the qualia, there is certain value or rationalization attached to that, how you deal with that particular cognition, depending on the qualia that is associated with it, right? You need to have color in order to have full cognition. Suppose I have been. This is basically close to an axiom of mine, but I'm not sure if it needs to be an axiom. I have a strong notion that I can have full cognition of. I can't call it a full cognition unless I have a color or colors involved in it, right? Just like the lady in red, right? Just saying lady is too fluffy, right? So lady in red, you're to say that it has to have that. There has to be some colors there in order for me to really associate or cognize it, right? Suppose I've been blind since birth, and I'm interested in building an ontology. I like your ontology, so I said, yeah, let's. So I decided to copy it, but without the visual qualia because I never experienced them. I don't know what is going on in blind people. I mean, they might need to work from a particular kind of ontology. They have to have a different or a slightly modified ontology. I wouldn't rule that out. That's why I'm very concerned about people having their own ontology, right? Why would you want to copy it? I don't know. It's maybe a choice of words, but yeah, I understand where you're going, right? So I wonder if you'd say, sure, feel free to create your ontology however you want. Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Why would I limit anybody's, need to go and do an ontology? Nobody. I mean, I don't want anybody to change my ability to make my own ontology. I've just done it, right? Yeah, I don't want anybody to come, hey, you're not allowed to do ontology over there, right? Fuck off you, right? So I will have to, by the same principle, I would have to extend that to everybody else. And I would want that because the idea of the free market, if you take from an economic standpoint, right, it is that those who are best at creating various shit, right, useful shit, are those who are usually most economic about it, those who waste as little as possible. Because those are the ones who can sell it cheapestly, most cheap compared to the quality. There might be, it's not necessarily the cheapest version that is the best, right? If you want really, they say, I'm very much into making pizzas, right? If you want a good pizza, you have to shelf out to a particular quality of flour for your pizza. You can't take the cheapest wheat flour there is, right? You have to, in order for it to be of that particular quality I want, I need to go and find that particular quality. But that doesn't mean that all the flours of that quality, I would need to take the most expensive one. I might take the cheapest one that has that particular quality I need. So it's the level of quality compared to the price you pay for that particular quality, right? So in the same sense that if there wasn't a competition towards giving quality at the lowest costs, there wouldn't be a need to find that level. In the same fashion that if you don't get somebody to bounce against you with a different ontology, you might never find out if there are flaws in yours. If everybody, I have an ontology, I'm not listening to anybody, no, go away, you will never find the potential flaws, right? Just like you're doing here, you're criticizing my ontology. You possibly have some kind of ontology you're working from already, and you're bouncing that against mine. And I'm saying, well, there might be something there, right? Or I'm saying, I don't think so, I don't understand where I come from, but I think you have misunderstood my whatever, right? That's what I want. I want that competition, right? I don't want to be somebody who says, hey, I have the perfect solution. It's the best for the next 100 years. It's the only one that is functional. And I am the priest of Essentia Foundation. Something like that. It's megalomaniacal, right? Like I'm referring to Bernardo Castro. He gives me the fucking creeps now, right? Sure, feel free to create your ontology however you want. Sure. Certainly, you can't make me see, but you could easily convince me of the reality of sight by accurately describing from a distance the objects in my hands. I have to take that one again. You can't make me see, but you could easily convince me of the reality of sight by accurately describing from a distance the objects in my hands. Yeah, but then you would be an experience in my mind. Though I'm saying it's far away from there's a far distance to you in my experience, but that experience is still mine, right? You are a subjective experience of mine. Just like you are in a subjective experience, if you are out there holding whatever shit in your hand, saying, that guy looking at me over there, mumbling something, is a particular subjective experience of yours. I can't get to your subjective experience of me, and you can't get to my subjective experience of you, right? You can only say, I have an experience, and I'm going with the axiom that experience over there, that cognition, that dude who's mumbling something about what I have in my hands, is actually something out there. I'm treating my experience as something out there, but it's still my experience. It isn't that which I'm pointing to, isn't out there. That's still a part of my experience. That's the trick. That's the hurdle you need to get over, right? You are alluding to the idea of propositions, right? It's a very essential part of my philosophy. If I have something I call an object, and there's another object over there that I consider something axiomatically the same as me, which I axiomatically have decided that can do the same as me, having the same kind of subjective experiences that I have. So we could possibly be agreeing on that subjective experience of mine that I call the object, right? But how do I do that if I don't have access to your subjective experience? Well, the only way is to communicate using a proposition saying, do you see that elephant, right? And even then, if there's a yes or a no from the other one, you can't know whether or not they're lying, right? It's all up to you to decide, right? That's why it's so necessary. You need to do some philosophy before you venture into the world, so to say, right? Okay, now in the construction of my ontology, should or shouldn't I consider the empirical knowledge that something I can't perceive, in fact, What? What? Hang on, mate. Hang on. Now, in the construction of my ontology, should or shouldn't I consider the empirical knowledge that something I can't perceive, in fact, exists? No. What you know is what exists, right? That's why you call it knowledge. It's not something you can't perceive. You can't perceive something. Something you can't perceive can't be knowledge because you're not perceiving it. I'm not sure about the term perceive here, but it's like if it's not if there's no qualia, there is no cognition, so there's no knowledge, right? Empirical knowledge, that's why it's probably a very bad idea to put knowledge into my ontology that way I did in the last one, because it takes away necessary steps of explanation, right? So I'm going to change that, because it creates more problems than it solves, right? No. Hang on, mate. You have your experience, right? When you're doing an ontology, you're basically just describing what is there, right? I have this category of phenomena, there's that category of phenomena, there's other category of phenomena, and they're similar because they are of this kind, and they're different because of this, and whatever. Among that, I personally want to classify something as knowledge because I have a purpose with the idea of knowledge, right? My knowledge is cognitions. If I cognize lady, that's knowledge. If I cognize elephant, that's knowledge. All I know is lady. All I know is elephant. All I know is beaver. All I know is, right, Eiffel Tower, right? I have no access to an external world just because I classified it as knowledge. I'm just classifying a particular aspect, particular category of my ontology as knowledge because I have a particular purpose with it, right? And let me lift the lid a little about what that purpose is. Because I cannot see a way out of, I can't argue my way to an external world, but I can't argue it away either, right? Because I have no access to it, I can neither say it isn't there or it is there. So what's the best choice? In my opinion, the best choice is considering that particular aspect of my phenomena is a representation of an outside. And that representation is knowledge. Because it's the deepest insight into that external world. How would I argue for that? I'm doing my epistemology, which is actually what I'm doing right now, right? In my epistemology, what ends up being knowledge is the cognition, like elephant or lady or beaver, right? And that's what I can communicate in a proposition with somebody else. Do you experience beaver? Do you experience lady? Well, which lady? Yeah, the lady in red, If there are 10 ladies, well, the lady in red over there, right? That's how it works for me, right? Okay. Thank you very much for your very, very good questions and scrutinization of what I'm trying to say. And you pinpoint a few weaknesses in my philosophy, or at least it's not something that I have clarified sufficiently and might need a honing of the use of terms in order to make sure that it doesn't come across as weird or unfounded or something like that, right? So thank you very much for that. I very much appreciate your questions here, and keep them coming. I'm not trying to boss you around, right? And it's this, it's underneath this video, chicken or egg, metaphilosophy, philosophy, and ontology, right? Only 67 views. Ontology is apparently not something people are looking for in their everyday, right? Though they should be, right? So, and there is something that is weird to me, that though you could say that the production value of my videos here is very low, right? I'm sitting here in my sofa with my laptop, I'm just recording it, and right? But how fancy do I need to have neon lights and funny posters and little statues of Plato or Socrates? Would that help? I don't think so, right? It's about the arguments. I don't want it to be flashy as such, right? But though, if I receive sufficient funding in donations from my viewers, and donation links below, right? And there's also on the board there are links to crypto donations if you are into cryptos and want to donate that way. Is there something do I need to do it differently about donations, or what is it, right? That if I got sufficient donations, I might change my office room into a YouTube studio, right? But as far as my donations go at the moment, there is not nearly enough for something like creating a studio and running that, right? So, if you want, better picture quality than this, and maybe a nice microphone on a boom, and what are they called, right? And mixing directly into a computer, you need to make some more donations so I can finance it that way, right? But I don't think that's necessarily the point, right? I only have 67 views on a video like this. So, of course, hardcore philosophy is not something that the average person in their everyday are looking for, I would think, right? On the other hand, some philosophical videos get a lot of views, right? So that it seems to me that on the YouTube front of things, I must have been flagged somehow as not worthy of getting a high score in if you search a particular term like ontology, I'm not going to pop up to the top, right? The algorithm says he's boring, right? So because I'm classified as boring, I am put further down the line, so I stay boring, right? All those who get a lot of views are those who also get a lot of views. So it's sort of a self-catalyzing process of appealing to likes and comments and sharing and whatever, right? So it's like beating the algorithm, right? So I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to beat that algorithm, other than I can appeal to you, if you don't mind, try to give me a leg up on this, and like my videos and share them and give me some comments, right? So, with that said, have a nice day. See you in the next one.